The rain was relentless that morning in Charleston, South Carolina. Thick, cold drops that drummed against black umbrellas and soaked through the hem of my dress. It was the kind of rain that felt personal, like the sky itself had joined in mourning. I stood beside the mahogany casket, my black gloves clutching the handle of my umbrella so tightly my knuckles ached. Inside that box was my husband of 38 years, William Mercer, the man who had once promised me forever in a small white church just a few miles from here. The pastor's voice floated through the humid air, but his words seemed distant, muffled, as though I was hearing them underwater. I could feel the wet grass beneath my heels sinking ever so slightly with each shift of my weight. Around me, mourners gathered in clusters, friends, business associates, family. But grief didn't unite us today. No, there was something else in the air, something colder than the rain. I caught sight of his sister, Linda, standing near the front. Her black veil didn't hide the way her eyes avoided mine, darting instead to the ground whenever I looked her way. Beside her stood Charles Whitmore, William's longtime business partner, leaning in close to whisper something into her ear. Whatever it was, it made them both press their lips together in the kind of tight, knowing smirk people wear when they think they're safe from being overheard. But it wasn't them who made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It was him, Thomas Mercer, my stepson.
He was standing just beyond the casket, his posture relaxed, hands in the pockets of his tailored black suit. And on his face, not grief, not loss, but the faint curve of a smile that didn't belong at his father's funeral. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. He didn't flinch. Instead, his smirk deepened, as if to say, "You have no idea what's coming." I tried to focus on the pastor again, on the words about love and loss, but I couldn't. My mind drifted to the last conversation William and I had before he passed. The way his hand squeezed mine in the hospital bed, his eyes searching mine for something. Reassurance, maybe. Or forgiveness. At the time, I thought he was simply scared of leaving me alone. Now, standing there, rain soaking through my coat, I began to wonder if there was something he hadn't told me. The final prayer was said. The casket was lowered. People began to drift away, their umbrellas bobbing like dark flowers in the storm. I stayed a moment longer, my gloved hand resting on the edge of the lowering device, the wood of the casket still visible. "I'll be okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was telling him or trying to convince myself. When I finally turned to leave, I caught Thomas watching me again. This time, he tilted his head ever so slightly, a gesture that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't until much later that I realized that smirk was not about grief. It was about victory, a victory he thought he'd already won.
2 weeks after the funeral, I found myself sitting in a high-ceilinged law office in downtown Charleston, its walls lined with dark mahogany shelves and framed degrees that seemed older than me. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with a kind of dampness that clung to your skin. I wasn't alone. Linda sat directly across from me, her thin fingers wrapped around a designer handbag as if it were a lifeline. Charles Whitmore occupied the chair beside her, casually flipping through his phone. And of course, Thomas Mercer leaned back in his seat with the kind of smug ease only a man certain of his victory could display. The lawyer, Mr. Henry Caldwell, sat behind a massive desk, his silver-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose as he shuffled papers. He was an old friend of William's, or so I thought, but the way his eyes flicked to Thomas before meeting mine, it made something inside me twist. "Mrs. Mercer," he began, his voice smooth but lacking warmth, "as you know, your late husband left a will, which we will now read in the presence of all relevant parties." I nodded, my hands clasped in my lap. I had no reason to expect anything unusual. William had always been clear about wanting to take care of me. We'd built a life together, nearly 4 decades. Caldwell cleared his throat and began. "To my beloved wife, Evelyn Mercer, I leave..." I leaned forward slightly, bracing for the words. "The estate? The house? The accounts?" "My personal effects and a sum of $1,000 in recognition of our years together." I froze.
The words didn't make sense at first, like he had read them in a foreign language. $1,000? That must be a mistake, I said quietly. "Henry, you know William..." But Thomas's low chuckle cut me off. "No mistake, Evelyn. Dad wanted his estate to go where it belongs." Caldwell continued, his tone maddeningly neutral. "The remainder of my assets, including all property, investments, and business holdings, shall go to my son, Thomas Mercer." The words echoed in my head, each one heavier than the last. The house, the savings, the business, everything gone. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my skin prickling hot and cold all at once. "This isn't right," I managed, my voice trembling but sharp. "William would never leave me with nothing." "That's exactly what he did," Thomas said, leaning forward now, his eyes gleaming. "Guess you weren't as important to him as you thought." For a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tear that smug look off his face. But something in Caldwell's expression, a flicker, almost imperceptible, told me this wasn't over. And I was right, because just as Thomas was about to sign the acceptance papers, Caldwell cleared his throat again. "There is one more document. It was delivered to my office the day after Mr. Mercer's passing." Thomas's smirk faltered. Linda's head snapped up. And I held my breath.
Mr. Caldwell reached into his desk drawer with deliberate slowness, the kind that made the air in the room feel heavier. From a plain manila envelope, he pulled out a sealed letter, the wax still unbroken, bearing William's signature in thick, deliberate strokes. Thomas shifted in his seat. "What is that?" he demanded, the smugness in his voice replaced by something sharper. Unease. Caldwell didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed the envelope on the polished desk like it was a priceless artifact, letting everyone stare at it. Then his eyes found mine. "Mrs. Mercer, William left very specific instructions. This document was to be read only after the formal will and only in the presence of all named beneficiaries." A shiver ran down my spine. Named beneficiaries? The will had only named me for a paltry $1,000 and Thomas for everything else. So who else could possibly be in this second document? "Go on and open it," Thomas snapped, trying to mask his agitation with authority. Caldwell raised one eyebrow, but didn't rush. With a small silver blade, he sliced through the wax seal. The faint scent of William's cologne drifted up. His cologne. My heart tightened. I could almost see him sitting at his desk, pen in hand, deciding what words would be read in this moment.
Caldwell began to read, and every syllable seemed to reverberate in the room. "If you are hearing this, it means my formal will has already been read, and if that is the case, then Thomas, you are no doubt smiling right now, thinking you have won." Thomas's jaw clenched. Linda shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us.
I crafted that will, knowing exactly how you would react, son. You have spent years treating people as stepping stones, assuming loyalty can be bought or bullied. But my true intentions were never meant to be in the open from the start. My breath caught. I could feel Thomas's glare burning into me, but I didn't look away from Caldwell. The true disposition of my estate is detailed in this second document, to be acted upon immediately. And Thomas, your inheritance depends entirely on what happens next. Caldwell paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. The tension was so thick I could hear the faint hum of the desk lamp. "Go on," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. Caldwell continued. "All assets are to be placed into a private trust. The trustee, Evelyn Mercer, will determine distributions based on the recipient's actions over the next 6 months. This includes the family home, the business, and all liquid funds." It was like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Thomas's face went pale, then flushed red. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "This isn't legal." "Oh, it's legal," Caldwell interrupted smoothly, "and binding. Your father made sure of it." For the first time since the funeral, I felt a flicker of something unexpected. Not relief, exactly. Not joy, but power. And as I glanced at Thomas's furious expression, I knew one thing. This game was only beginning.
Thomas pushed back his chair so hard that it scraped across the hardwood floor, the screech echoing in the office. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "Dad would never put her in charge of the estate. She's not even blood." Caldwell's calm expression didn't waver. "He did, Thomas. And not only that, he set conditions, very specific ones." Thomas froze mid-step. "Conditions?" "Yes," Caldwell said, unfolding the second page. He adjusted his glasses and read slowly, savoring the tension like a man reading the verdict of a long trial. "The trust shall remain under Evelyn Mercer's sole management for 6 months. During this time, my son will receive no direct access to any funds unless approved by the trustee. His continued eligibility for inheritance will depend on demonstrating integrity, respect, and responsible conduct." Thomas let out a harsh laugh. "So I have to play nice with her for half a year? That's your little revenge, Dad?" Caldwell kept reading. "Any harassment, threats, or legal interference aimed at the trustee will result in immediate forfeiture of all rights to the estate. In such a case, the remainder will be donated to the Charleston Children's Foundation, the charity your mother and I supported for decades." I almost gasped. William had loved that charity, but Thomas had despised it, calling it a waste of money on strangers. Caldwell folded the document deliberately. "There's more," he said. Thomas narrowed his eyes but said nothing. "Evelyn is also authorized to liquidate any assets necessary to protect the trust or herself from harm, including the sale of the Mercer family business. My final wish is that my legacy be preserved with dignity, not consumed by greed." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Then, Thomas leaned over the desk, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, Evelyn? You haven't. I can outlast 6 months." I met his gaze steadily. "Maybe you can," I said softly. "Or maybe, for the first time in your life, you'll have to prove you deserve something instead of just taking it." His jaw tightened. "This isn't over." I allowed myself the faintest smile. "No, it's just getting started." It didn't even take Thomas 24 hours to make his move. The morning after the reading of the will, I found an official-looking envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a formal request for financial review.
a polite legal phrase for, I want to dig through every cent you control and find a way to take it. I sipped my coffee slowly, reading the document twice. It was exactly the kind of power play I expected from him. Fast, aggressive, and designed to intimidate. What he didn't realize was that I'd been married to William Mercer for 35 years. I had been through corporate lawsuits, cutthroat boardroom politics, and even once handled a hostile takeover attempt when William was overseas. Thomas's little ambush? Child's play. By noon, I was sitting in Caldwell's office. He's trying to corner me, I said, sliding the envelope across the desk. Caldwell skimmed it and smirked. It's a bluff. He's hoping you'll overreact and make a mistake. So we don't fight it? I asked. Oh, we fight it, Caldwell said, leaning forward, but we fight it our way. That same afternoon, Caldwell filed an official notice with the court. Trustee refuses review without probable cause. We also sent Thomas a polite but icy letter. Mr. Mercer, your request for a financial review is denied. All decisions are in accordance with the trust conditions. Any further attempts to circumvent these conditions will be documented and may result in your forfeiture of inheritance.
I knew that would drive him insane. And it did. That evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Enjoying my father's money, Evelyn? Thomas's voice dripped with malice. It's not your father's money anymore, I said calmly. It's his legacy. And right now, I'm the one protecting it. You think you can hide behind lawyers? I can make your life miserable. I paused, letting silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. Thomas, if you start a war with me, you'd better pray you win quickly, because I fight to the end. He hung up without another word. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. This was only day 2, and already the storm clouds were gathering. But I wasn't afraid. If Thomas wanted a war, I'd give him one, and I already knew my first counterattack. Thomas thought this was about money. It wasn't. It was about control. And in a war for control, information is worth more than any bank account. The next morning, I opened the locked cabinet in William's old study, the one Thomas had never been allowed to touch. Inside were 35 years of files, records, and notes. My husband was meticulous about keeping paper trails, even on things that could ruin someone. I wasn't looking for Thomas's name. I was looking for patterns. It didn't take long. A folder labeled Mercer Holdings, Internal Review 2017 caught my eye. Inside were documents detailing irregular transactions in one of the subsidiary companies, transactions signed off by Thomas Mercer. By noon, I was sitting in Caldwell's office again. I slid the file across the desk. Did these look legal to you? Caldwell adjusted his glasses, flipping through the pages. His eyebrows lifted. Oh, Evelyn, this isn't just questionable, this is criminal. If these records are accurate, your stepson committed fraud to cover a massive personal debt. My pulse quickened. Can we use it? Not yet, Caldwell said. We keep it in our back pocket. The moment he pushes too far, we show him we have the matches and the gasoline. That evening, I drafted a short email to Thomas. Thomas, your request for a financial review has been noted. I suggest we both act in ways that protect the family name. Digging too deep into certain matters might expose things that can't be undone. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Within an hour, he replied with just 3 words. What do you know? I didn't answer. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the Charleston sunset burn gold over the water. For the first time since William's funeral, I felt the shift. The balance of power was tilting, and I had no intention of letting it slip back.
3 days passed without a word from Thomas. Then, on the 4th morning, I woke to the sound of tires crunching on my driveway. I pulled back the curtain. Thomas's black Mercedes was parked right outside, angled like he was ready for a quick getaway. He didn't knock. He stormed in. "Where is it?" he barked, slamming the door behind him. "Where is what?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass. "You've been snooping. I can tell. You've got something on me. I want it. Now." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Thomas, you're in my home uninvited. Be careful about the way you speak to me." That only made him angrier. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You think you can play games with me? You have no idea how dangerous I can be when I'm backed into a corner." "Oh, I have some idea. I've been watching you my entire marriage to your father. I know exactly what you're capable of. And now, you should know I'm capable of more." He froze. For the first time, I saw it, fear flickering behind his eyes. He tried to hide it, but it was there. He leaned in so close I could smell the bitterness of his coffee and rage. "If you breathe a word about me to anyone," he began. I cut him off. "You'll what? Add another crime to your list?" That did it. He stepped back, jaw tight, and headed for the door. But before leaving, he turned and said, "You're going to regret this." I watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing down the oak-lined road. And in that moment, I realized something important. Thomas wasn't in control anymore. He was reacting. And people who react make mistakes. The day after Thomas's little outburst, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was deep, deliberate. "Mrs. Whitmore, I believe we share a mutual interest in keeping Thomas in check." I didn't recognize the voice, but the way he said Thomas told me this man knew him and didn't like him. "Who is this?" I asked, careful not to give away anything. "Someone who knows what Thomas has been hiding. Meet me at the Battery, tomorrow, 5 p.m. I'll be on the bench near the old cannons. Wear something inconspicuous." And just like that, he hung up. My first instinct, it was a trap. But my second instinct, the one honed from years of quietly watching Robert's business world from the sidelines, told me this was an opportunity. So, the next day, I dressed in jeans, a windbreaker, and a baseball cap. I looked more like a tourist than a widow. The sun was setting over Charleston Harbor when I saw him, a man in his late 50s wearing a worn navy blazer. His posture was military, his eyes scanning constantly. "You came," he said, without looking at me. "You called," I replied, sitting down beside him. He wasted no time. Thomas has been laundering money through one of Robert's shell companies. He's sloppy, and the paper trail leads right back to him. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my pulse quickened. This was bigger than I imagined. The man slipped a small envelope on the bench between us. "Inside is everything you need. Bank transfers, emails, even photos. But if Thomas finds out you have this, he'll panic. And when he panics, he's dangerous." I slid the envelope into my bag, my fingers brushing the cool paper. "Why help me?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because Robert was my friend, and Thomas, he's about to destroy everything your husband built." The man stood, buttoned his blazer, and walked away without another word. I sat there a moment longer, watching the water, feeling the weight of the envelope in my bag. This wasn't just about the will anymore. This was about taking Thomas down completely. And now, I had the ammunition to do it. The Charleston County Courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and tension. I could feel Thomas's eyes on me as I walked in, my heels clicking against the marble floor. He sat at the plaintiff's table with that smug, snake-like grin, the one that always said, "I've already won." "Mrs. Whitmore," my attorney whispered as we took our seats, "are you sure about this?" I tightened my grip on my bag, the bag holding the very envelope I'd received at the Battery. "Yes," I said. "It's time." The judge entered. "All rise," the bailiff called out, and the room shifted into silence. The case had been straightforward so far, Thomas claiming Robert's estate should be divided equally among the children, conveniently omitting the sealed second will. He painted me as the selfish widow hoarding what he believed was his birthright. But today, that story was going to burn. We let him speak first. Thomas's lawyer strutted to the podium, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Your Honor, my client has been unjustly deprived of his father's assets." I almost laughed. Assets was a pretty word for dirty money. When it was our turn, my attorney didn't go for the jugular right away. Instead, he slid a stack of photocopies to the clerk. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit newly discovered evidence pertaining to Mr. Thomas Whitmore's recent financial activities." Thomas's confident smile faltered just a hair. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Proceed." One by one, the documents were displayed on the overhead projector. Bank transfers from Robert's company to offshore accounts, all under shell corporations tied to Thomas. And then the emails. Clear, undeniable messages between Thomas and a known financial fixer in Miami. The language wasn't subtle. "Move it before she finds out. Dad's gone. She's in the dark." A low murmur swept the courtroom. The judge's gaze hardened. "Mr. Whitmore, do you care to explain why these transactions occurred under your name mere weeks after your father's passing?" Thomas shifted in his chair, his jaw clenching. "This is irrelevant to the will." "No," the judge interrupted sharply. "This is highly relevant. Fraud in estate matters is a serious offense." I sat there, calm, almost serene, as Thomas's face turned a deep shade of crimson. For years, he'd spoken to me like I was the naive one, the outsider. Now, in front of everyone, his mask was slipping. My attorney delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, these actions not only disqualify Mr. Whitmore from claiming additional assets, but they may also warrant a criminal investigation. We request the court enforce the stipulations of the second will in full, granting Mrs. Whitmore sole control over her late husband's estate." The judge didn't hesitate. "Request granted." Thomas froze. He didn't even turn to look at me as the gavel came down, but I looked at him, and I smiled, because in that moment, I knew he wasn't just out of the will, he was about to lose everything. The Charleston sun was blinding as I stepped out of the courthouse, but for the first time in months, my shoulders felt lighter. The reporters were already waiting, microphones and cameras pointed toward the steps. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have any comment on the verdict?" I gave them a polite smile. "No comment, for now," because the real story wasn't over yet. When I got home, there was a voicemail on my landline, one I almost deleted without listening. The voice was female, sharp, and cold. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think you should know something about Thomas. Call me back." I hesitated, then dialed. Her name was Julia. She claimed to be Thomas's business partner, but as she spoke, I realized that business meant money laundering, fake contracts, and debts to the wrong kind of people. And now that Thomas's access to Robert's accounts had been cut off, he had no way to pay them back. "He's desperate," she warned. "And desperate men do stupid things." That evening, I decided to open Robert's second will again. There was a line I'd glossed over before, tucked near the end. "If any beneficiary is found to have acted in bad faith or attempted to defraud the estate, their share will be transferred to the Charleston Children's Trust in memory of Eleanor Whitmore." Eleanor! Robert's mother!
That meant Thomas's entire inheritance, even from the first will, was gone. The next morning, it was on the news. The FBI had raided Thomas's downtown office. Agents walked out with boxes of documents, hard drives, and computers. The anchor's voice was crisp and merciless. Thomas Whitmore, son of late businessman Robert Whitmore, is under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Later that week, I visited the Charleston Children's Trust. The director, a soft-spoken woman named Linda, showed me the plans for a new community center, all funded by the money Thomas had just lost. "Your legacy will help thousands of children for decades to come," she said. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace.
And as I stood there, watching the first blueprints being pinned to the wall, I realized Thomas's greed had given me the perfect revenge, not by destroying him outright, but by ensuring every dollar he'd tried to steal went to a cause he could never control. That night, as the tide rolled in over Charleston Harbor, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine. For the first time since Robert's passing, the house felt like mine. Not because of the money, but because I had protected his legacy. And in doing so, I'd finally claimed my own strength. And somewhere, I hoped Robert was smiling. If this story gripped you to the very last second, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss another jaw-dropping true story. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my place?